Ready. And action. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for part 3 of Professor Victor Singing Eagle's brilliant lectures on Native American literature here at Sisseton, Wahpeton College. Thursday, January 30th, 2025, meeting 3. And now, without any further yakety yak, your host, the brilliant professor himself, Singing Eagle! Yeah! All right. Now, I got to quit fooling around and get back to our lesson. We were talking about Native American ethics, or I should say Native North American, because you guys know I'm part Canadian as well. I'm a double agent. No, Native aesthetics and non-native or Western. I don't like to use that word, Western aesthetics. But what's going on? Well, way back when I was a college student, I was going to college with Sherman Alexie. He went to Gonzaga, and I went to Eastern Washington University. But anyway, a bunch of us native writers, young upstarts, we'd get together and we'd sit around, and I would drink my Coke, and Sherman would have his Pepsi, or whatever, and we'd be discussing what is, well, let me just pull it up here. Let's look. Issues of authenticity. Are the works that are being written actually written by natives, or are they written about natives? That's a serious question to bring up, is it not? What do we want to consider Native American literature? Also, what if the person is not enrolled or into a federally recognized tribe? What if the person's a mixed blood, or maybe an urban Indian and his family or her family never bothered to get enrolled and get the CDIB and all that other fun stuff? So there's one thing, issues of authenticity. How about this one? When we look at modern, especially modern, Native American or Native Canadian First Nations literature, we have to ask ourselves, well, who gets to set the criteria for what constitutes good writing, good poetry? You see, who's setting the criteria? What are the criteria? Is it fellow natives? Or is it non-natives? Are we using Washichu values? Are we using native values? What tribes are we using even? What culture areas? Oftentimes, as I was speaking with one of my friends, Debbie Louie, who's another writer, and also Tiffany Midge, we suspect that when native writers start publishing, it says here, oftentimes, well, only the first writers are considered to be the best. Like, let's say in Scott Mamede, he's one of the beginning, we're going to go all the way back to Zit Kalasha as well, but the very first people who publish, and then everything else is judged after that writer. Now, what if that very first writer actually, or very first few writers actually sucked? Then, well, are we going to still judge our works, subsequent works, based upon those first few writers? That's a big question. And then my good friend, my good twin, I call myself the evil twin, and he's the good twin. Du Huawei, that's his Chinese name. His English name is Harvey Dumars. He's asking the same question. Who's telling the news stories anyway? We had a good discussion yesterday about this. By the way, there's also another question that I put up here is, what are some universals? And what do I mean by that, universals? Well, universals means things that we might all have in common. There may be tribal universals, and there may also be universals like span cultures all over the world. People from different cultures might decide or agree these things are really good. All right, now I'm talking way too much. We're going to scroll down, change the channel a little bit, go to generations. Keep in mind that I'm going to start posting this stuff. Oh, this is what I was talking about. Here are the people. Zitkalasha, who's Yankton, Dakota. I forgot what her real name, her Washichu name, her what do you call it? Boarding school name might be Bromden. I don't feel like looking it up. I'll look it up. What the heck? Is it Isabella? Well, let's pull it up. Who is Zitkalasha? Who was Zitkala? I don't know if somebody else looked it up too. Her name was Bronin? It doesn't say what her real name or her non-Indian name was. Carlisle School, Zitkala-san, let's go. Gertrude Simmons Bonin, that's what her non-native name was, Gertrude. Who names a kid Gertrude? Never mind, stop messing around. I got to get back to the story or our lesson plans as it be. So we got Zitkalasha, we got John Joseph Matthews and James Paitiamo, John Milton Oskison, Darcy McNichol. All of these people are 19th century. And one of the big themes or thematic elements of the early generation, the first, we call them the first generation of big time, well-known, noteworthy native writers. They dealt with the struggle for survival, oftentimes in the face of insurmountable odds or terrible odds, dealing with surviving boarding school, or as we say up north, residential schools, where churches, these priests would come along and grab kids and rip them away from their family and take them to some boarding school prison-like place, and shave off all their hair and spray DDT on them to delouse them or whatever, and teach them English and pretty much alienate the poor children. Zitkalasha writes about this very well. I'm going to share some of her work with you later. Now, we're going to roll into the second generation, which starts at the second quarter of the 20th century, all the way up to the 1980s and maybe a little bit more. These folks are talking about resistance and recovery, resisting colonization or the colonial attitude. And how do we recover from the damage that has been done to us? So here's some in Scott Momaday, who passed away last fall. God rest his soul. I knew him. Leslie Marmon Silko, who has ADHD just like I do. We chat a lot. James Welch, who also passed away. Louise Erdrich. So there's, again, resistance and recovery. How do we recover from all the damage done to us? 1980s all the way up to the 2000s, suddenly we've got people like my classmates, Sherman Alexie, Tiffany Midge, Eric Gansworth, and Tommy Orange. These guys are dealing with identity issues and resurgence. What does this mean? Well, what does it mean to be a real Indian anyway? Sherman Alexie deals with this a lot in his poetry, as does Tiffany Midge. She's always excoriating people whom she calls pretendians. I believe Alexie used to call them twinkle bunnies. And Tommy Orange kind of escapes that how do I want to say this? Escapes that trap or that hamster wheel, if you would, of identity. What is a real Indian? And I'll explain what I mean by this. Way back in the late 1990s, Sherman Alexie issued a challenge to natives. He said, well, I am a Res Indian, and I've written the great Res Indian novel, but nobody yet has written the urban Indians. So he's talking about, I got the Res Indian stuff down, but we don't have any urban Indian writers. Nobody has written the great urban Indian novel. And suddenly Tommy Orange pops up. We'll talk about that in the next video. I'm already in 10 minutes and 15 seconds, so I'll stop here. Thank you so much. Talk to you later.